Hey, howdy, hey, what is going on, y'all? It is your boy Pyroto here. We are back at it with once again another video. In today's video, I myself am going to be rating y'all's enclosures. Now, I had a bunch of y'all send me y'all's enclosures on Instagram and through my email, and I got a lot, and I mean a lot of enclosures. So without further ado, let's hop into it. First, we're going to start with the emails, then we're going to move to the Instagram DMs and kind of work our way from there. And I'm going to be rating each and every one of y'all's enclosures. Now, the way I'll be rating it is it's going to go 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. Now, there are going to be other things that I may recommend or like to change up in that enclosure, but I'm not necessarily trying to say that it's bad. So please, nobody take this too seriously. I'm not trying to hurt any feelings or anything like that. I'm just going to give my point of view and what I would do differently, what I would add, what I would get rid of, just things like that. And one more thing, if none of y'all get a 10, don't be surprised. Half the enclosures in my reptile room, I wouldn't even rate a 10, so it's not anything against you guys. I'm just very picky on how I keep my animals and how I think animals should be kept. Before we start, let's get a sip of water because this is going to be a good one. I've got a lot of enclosures to rate. Alrighty, y'all, popping up right here is our first enclosure. This one comes from Grant Reinhardt. He says, this is a home for a little bearded dragon. He has heat, UVB lighting. Also, I love your videos very much. Well, thank you for that. Now, as y'all can see, he's got a pretty decent setup for a bearded dragon. He's got the basking lights. He's got the basking branches. He's got the hide, the dish, and everything like that. Honestly, that's a pretty decent beginner setup. Now, personally, I would add more plants, more branches, more hides and stuff, just to make it look a little bit more naturalistic. But I really do like how he has it set up, and if you are a beginner, this will work really well. Now, I also see a little white dish over here. I can't tell if that's a food dish or a water dish. If it's a food dish, I personally would add a water dish. A lot of people don't because they spray the bearded dragons down, but I would personally add a water dish. Other than that, this enclosure looks good. I'm going to start off with a 5 out of 10, just because I don't know how y'all's other enclosures are going to look compared to this. They could look better, they could look worse. I'm not sure yet, but we're starting off with a 5 out of 10. Let's continue on. And next up, for our next enclosure, this one comes from Animal Lover. Now, it is a 180 by 60 by 80 centimeter setup for a rat snake. Now, this rat snake enclosure is probably one of the coolest rat snake enclosures I have seen. Obviously, they're displaying a picture of the rat snake here as well. But then once we get to the enclosure, this looks like a really solid setup, especially for one rat snake. Heck, some people put a 40-gallon for one rat snake, so the size enclosure that they have here works really well. Now, from what I can see, I see a background, which the background looks super duper good. I can see some plants, some fake plants or some bushes or something like that. We've got our water bowl, some hides. Now, once again, it's kind of hard to tell exactly everything y'all have with y'all setups just because of the fact that it's a picture. But from what I can see here for a rat snake, this looks like a really solid setup. This is like a really solid enclosure. I give this a good 8 out of 10. Alrighty, now moving along, we have one from Alex Rogala. Sorry if I mispronounced the names there. This is a baby veiled chameleon setup. Now, obviously, you can see they're very adorable baby veiled chameleon, but here on the enclosure, I really do like this setup. Looks like a good tall enclosure for a baby veiled chameleon. Typically, you want about a 3-foot enclosure in height and about 18 to 24 inches in width. Now, on the enclosure itself, I personally would add more plants and vines and whatnot. I see the 2 plants on the side, but I would personally string vines going across the enclosure. I'll just add a little bit more foliage and decor. One main thing with reptiles that a lot of people don't take into understanding is these animals want to be away from us as much as possible. Even though we like them, we love them, they don't really love us back. They just want to do their own thing. They want to chill, they want to hide, they want to eat, all that good stuff. And then, of course, I know you've got your heat and UVB, but I would definitely recommend getting more vines and plants and whatnot, just filling in the enclosure a little bit more. All in all, I'm going to give this enclosure a 5 out of 10. Once you get more plants and whatnot, then it'll look a whole lot better, and it'll give the chameleon a lot more places to move around. Well, y'all, that was our email section. Now let's move on to the Instagram DMs where we got a whole lot more, and let's check out the enclosures you guys sent me. And one more quick intermission thing, if I am like stuttering or anything like that, I've never filmed a video like this before, so just kind of bear with me, but let's just continue on. And next up, coming from Dominic Ramirez, we have an iguana enclosure. Now, he's got a blue iguana, which looks very similar to my blue iguana. Blue, a lot of you guys know who he is. But on this enclosure, it looks like a really good setup. Looks like he's got him in a 40-gallon breeder. I see a large water bowl. I see a food dish. I see his heat and UVB. It also looks like he's got a UVB strip, which is even better. Then he's also got some plants. He's got leaf litter on the ground. So I personally really like this setup. Now for an iguana, especially a baby iguana, a 40-gallon breeder will work perfectly fine for about a year to 2 years. Then eventually you definitely want to upgrade them because an iguana can get up to 6 feet.
Wow.
Now honestly, if there's anything that I was to change about that enclosure, it may be to add a little bit more decor, more plants and whatnot, just because you want to fill it in. But other than that, you don't want to fill it in too much, so that enclosure looks pretty darn good. Now I'm going to be rating that a 6 out of 10. So pretty dope setup. Moving on. Now next up, coming from Ultra Caden 121, he's got a 30-gallon tank with 4 hides, human hides, all that good stuff. As y'all can see, it's a pretty decent setup. I really like the bird's eye view that he did. You can see he's got a hide in each corner, then he's got one in the middle there, and then his human hide in the middle as well. I can also see a water bowl and potentially a calcium food dish. So that works really well. Now for a leopard gecko, that's more than enough. Leopard geckos aren't needy animals at all. And something like that, especially a 30-gallon enclosure for one, is definitely a good setup. So I'm going to give this enclosure another 6 out of 10. Then moving on from Caden Walker, we have a bioactive setup for American toads named Thomas and Pinky. Now a lot of y'all know, at one point in time I did have American toads, but unfortunately over time they passed away. Of course, American toads aren't very needy toads at all. They don't need a lot of space. They don't have much requirements. But for his bioactive setup, I see some pothos running across the back. I see some cork, some leaf litter, and a good-sized water bowl. And for American toads, that is more than enough of a good habitat, especially for 2. So I'm definitely going to rate that enclosure a 7 out of 10. So good job, Caden Walker. I really like that setup. I like that you have American toads. Not very many people have American toads. And let's continue on. So next up, coming from Finn Drennan, we have a hamster setup. Now, I don't know as much about mammals or anything like that as I do reptiles, but from what I can see, it looks like a pretty decent setup. It looks like for one hamster, that's a lot of space. Now, I don't know if it's a smaller enclosure than it looks, but he's got lots of decor, lots of enrichment for his hamster. Very decent hamster setup. Now, I can't give too much more info on it just because I don't know too much about mammals or anything like that, as I said, but we're going to give it a good 6 out of 10. Next up, from Paul Bassett, we have a 20-gallon turtle setup. Now this is a 20-gallon enclosure. He's got, it looks like 3 hatchlings, as he was saying, 3 baby turtles. Obviously you can't go wrong with baby turtles. Now this is like a pretty decent setup. He's got some pothos growing in there. The only thing that I personally would change is the substrate on the bottom. The main reasons I would change the substrates on the bottom, first thing is I personally just don't like that color and that aesthetic. The other reason is they look like little tiny pieces that if your turtle were to get a hold of, you risk them getting impaction. Now, it's not 100% guaranteed, and your turtle has to eat a lot of that gravel for anything bad to happen. But other than that, it looks like a really good setup. I assume he has his heat and UVB on them as well, but it looks like he's got it. So pretty decent turtle setup. Obviously, you'll have to upgrade him eventually. So for that setup, I'm going to give you a 6.5 out of 10 because a lot of people do a lot worse with their turtles. They'll put them in little containers and keep them in there for ages and ages. So definitely a really good setup. Next up, we have an enclosure from Nova the Skink. Now, they said this is a 40-gallon enclosure, which it definitely looks like a 40-gallon enclosure, and holy smokes, for one blue-tongue skink, 40 gallons is a good amount of space. Now I really like this setup. This is definitely one of the best blue-tongue skink setups I have personally seen in my time keeping animals. I see some hides there, I see a food dish, I think I see a water dish, I see a hammock, I see the plants. I mean, this is a really good setup. Easily a good 8.5 out of 10. Next up, we've got a Crusty Gecko enclosure coming from Safwan. Now, I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I probably absolutely just annihilated your name. But this enclosure looks like a very decent Crusty Gecko enclosure. Now, my voice is changing. It's because Houdini is currently trying to constrict me for whatever reason. Now, this looks like a 18-18-24 Crested Gecko enclosure, which is more than enough space for one adult Crested Gecko. I can see a little hide in there. I see lots of plants and all sorts of good stuff like that. Honestly, Crested Geckos are so simple, so easy to care for. So if this is your Crested Gecko enclosure, I see a little light at the top, by the way. I don't know if that's a heat light or anything like that. Some people have to put heat lights because where they live it's colder, but it could also be an LED light. I can't really tell. But all in all, this looks like a really dope Crested Gecko enclosure. I'm going to easily give it a 7 out of 10. Now moving along from Jack Hafner, we have a Crawfish Enclosure. So this is my little crawfish. His name is Salad because he loves lettuce. He likes to hide in Squidward's house and dig in his rocks at night. Now once again, I don't know too much about fish or anything like that. Looks like a pretty decent setup. I don't know too much what you would change. Personally, I like the more natural aesthetic, so I would do more sand and live plants. But if this works for you, then it works. Bro, Houdini, you gotta let go, dude. You're squeezing pretty good, bro. Oh my god, I'm getting red. I'm getting so red right now. I need to get him off me. Hold up. Oh, I can breathe. Okay, oxygen's flowing back. Okay. Okay. You pretty much killed me there, bro. Alrighty, y'all. Moving along. Oh, and before we move along, Jack Hafner, I gotta rate your enclosure 5 out of 10. Yeah, 5 out of 10. Just because personally, I would change the aesthetics of the enclosure, make it a little bit more naturalistic. But everybody has their own sort of opinion on their enclosure. My voice is just gone, guys. Oh my god. But yeah, cool cage. Alrighty, y'all, I am alive. I have not died yet, surprisingly. Next up from the Hatred YT, we have a leopard gecko tub setup. Now, from what I can see on this leopard gecko tub setup, looks like a really good setup. Not too sure what those lights are. I think he's got a heat pad, so I don't think those are heat lights, but I'm not too sure. They could be LED lights. Once again, it's just super hard to tell. But then, of course, I see all the decor and foliage, and I assume he's got hides in there. It's, once again, super hard to tell just because there's only so many angles you can get, obviously. And then, of course, a picture of his beautiful leopard gecko. Really good setup. I'm definitely going to give that a good 6.5 out of 10. Once again, the naturalistic, the bioactive setups just stand out to me so much. They look so naturalistic, so that's why I'm rating some of those a little bit higher. Nonetheless, so far all of you guys have had amazing setups. I'm really impressed with how well you guys take care of your animals. Well, lastly, some guy named Christopher Scott sent me his enclosure. A lot of you guys know who Christopher Scott is. I've done previous videos with him, and he sent me his bioactive setup. Now, this enclosure is definitely a good enclosure, but hey, guess we learned from the best, right? All in all, this is a really solid setup. I really like how the water is just crystal clear. Really good setup. So I'm going to give this easily an 8.5 out of 10. Now, those were some solid setups that you guys have sent me. Now, honestly, the only 10 out of 10 enclosures that I've ever seen are at like the Fort Worth Zoo, where they have the giant paludariums wall to wall. Heck, if you, me, or any of us create a zoo, then maybe we can do that. But for now, we have our enclosures how we have them. Once again, I'm sorry if any of y'all are upset for getting a lower number than y'all are expecting. I'm going to be honest with y'all, I wouldn't rate any enclosure in my reptile room a 10. Not a single one of them, because each one of my enclosures still has something I could add or do differently. But nonetheless, I love seeing y'all setups. And hey, if y'all want me to do a part 2, maybe with another YouTuber, then definitely let me know. Like this video, and we will do a part 2. And if y'all have more than one enclosure that y'all would like to feature, you are more than welcome to enter for part 2 whenever that is. Then of course, make sure to follow my Instagram, TheRealPiratoadYT. It's always linked in the description. Next, I'm going to ask y'all to follow my TikTok. I've recently started the TikTok, of course, all about my animals. Now, I'm still working with it. I'm still trying to get used to it, but you might as well. It's linked to somewhere in the description. Just go follow it. With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, subscribe. I will see you all in the next one. Peace!